This video is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/halocanon for a 30-day free trial and a free credit on an audiobook download. Stay tuned for more details. Now that we've covered Halo's Shadows of Reach in full, it's time to take a look at the bonus story, Sacrifice. There was a ton of speculation about what this story could be, concerns that a member of Blue Team would get killed off, but I don't think anyone guessed what the story would ultimately entail. Or if someone did, I never saw that, so good job if that someone exists. As you'll recall either from my summary and analysis of the book or Shadows of Reach itself, hopefully Shadows of Reach itself, the book mentions that Atriox conducted a raid on the Anodyne Spirit, aka the Forerunner Dreadnought once found at the Heart of High Charity and seen in Halo 2 and 3. From that raid, they recovered 3 fragments of the Holy Light, as the Covenant called it, the Forerunner slipspace crystal found in the Menakite portal complex beneath Castle Base in Halo First Strike. In First Strike, the crystal was destroyed by Battle of Installation 04 survivor Corporal Locklear at the cost of his own life. Most of the crystal was destroyed or lost, but Chieftain of the Gerald Hanai Tartarus was able to salvage 3 fragments and present them to the Prophet of Truth. Those fragments would be key in operating the portal on Earth to get to the Ark, and of course later for Atriox to return to the Milky Way. Sacrifice tells of this raid on the Anodyne Spirit and the cost of the crystal shard's recovery. From what we know, the story begins in probably late June, maybe sometime in July, but after the events of Awakening the Nightmare. 3 banished phantoms make their approach on the Anodyne Spirit's final resting place, a peninsula in one of the Ark's many bodies of water in a Forerunner city. The way things are described, I either imagine the Forerunner city concept that was cut from Halo 3 or something like the Halo Reach map Tempest. Considering the Reach portal site's description was based on the Halo Reach map High Noon, either option wouldn't surprise me here. Led by a chieftain named Minas, they take a staggered approach in case the key ship's defenses remain active. When they're confident that they can safely land, they do, approaching one of the ship's 3 central platforms. It's noted that most thought the ship to be destroyed during the Battle of the Ark, and we see that during Shadows of Reach when Inslan Gadogai expresses shock at hearing of the ship's survival. You may recall from the Phoenix log entry for Colony that the Megalocolo pair were searching through the resting place of Forerunner key ships for reasons unknown. Many had speculated at the time that it was to find Truth's ship, and it seems that we now have our answer. It's not directly confirmed, but that's the way it seems. Anyway. Getting back to the story, the 3 raiding parties land and disembark, and we meet our 2 other leaders. First is Zeratus, aka the Scourgemaker, who we briefly meet at the end of Shadows of Reach, and is noted for his love of killing for sport, particularly humans. Second is Orkro Vagadoon, a Blade Master, thus formerly Silent Shadow, and a name you may recognize as one of those that briefly appeared on the map in Halo Infinite's July demo. So obviously these 2 survive the raid. I'll be interested to see what kind of role Orkro takes in Infinite, but that's a topic for later or another day. Once disembarked, the group are able to enter thanks to the hacking skills of Itka, a Kigyar adept at accessing Forerunner technology. As he works, Itka notes that he finds some old and new securities, a hint of what's to come. At the same time, Minas reflects on the Dreadnought's history, noting that this would be the 3rd time it was infiltrated in this manner. First by ancient Sanshayum prophets wanting to learn the craft's secrets against the will of their society, and again by Sangheli during the War of Beginnings, the raid contributing to the eventual ceasefire between the Sangheli and Sanshayum and the crafting of the Writ of Union that founded the Covenant. Both occasions led to great bloodshed. And there's technically a 3rd occasion during and after Halo 2, when Master Chief, the Demon, infiltrated the craft to assassinate the Prophet of Truth. Though that ultimately failed, it too resulted in bloodshed, though this incident goes unmentioned. Ultimately though, Minas is just reflecting on whether more bloodshed is to come. The doors soon open and the raiding party moves in. Inside, Koros, captain of Minas' guard and nephew of Tartarus of all beings, begins leading the way to a section of the ship called the Aditum. As they make their way through the ship, we get some backstory on Koros. Being Tartarus' nephew, he served alongside his uncle and directly under the Prophet of Truth. Because of this, he had been inside the Dreadnought many times, probably the only one among the Banished who could make that claim. After Tartarus' death, Koros became disillusioned and left the Covenant before they traveled to the Ark, fleeing to Warial, a moon of the Jiralhanae homeworld of Doisak. Here, he made a living in the dockyards of Ividar Rooks. I'm not sure if that's the name of an individual or a location, though I would guess the latter. Anyway, it's here that Minas would eventually find Koros and recruit the young Jiralhanae. The group soon comes to a lift, which Itka activates with codes recovered from the ruins of High Charity. Seems that Voridus breaking into the ruins of the Holy City hadn't been a total waste, as after dealing with the Flood, the Banished were apparently able to raid the station and download all its stored data, which included codes for the Dreadnought. The lift takes the raiding party to one of the ship's 5 plenary arcades, large artificial gardens full of plants and animals. And just after they enter, Koros takes a shot from an unknown enemy, though nothing fatal. The Banished raiders manage to fight their enemy off, though not without a few losses, and soon discover these enemies to be remnants of the original Covenant that had holed up in the Dreadnought for the last 7 years. Minas wonders how these Covenant could have survived for 7 years in the ship, Koros revealing that there are enough supplies to last 70 years, no less 7. Minas then contacts his pilot, Bamoris, to have the Phantoms ready for a quick extraction before the party moves out again. So pausing here, let's talk about these Covenants surviving for 7 years in the Dreadnought. At its face, I can definitely see this happening. Truth would not have left the ship unguarded, and after the fall of the Covenant, those remnants would have nowhere to go. On its own, it's a pretty cool plot point that makes the raid all the more interesting. However, I have to wonder how these Covenant could have survived a Halo Pulse. Installation 08 was successfully fired, and powerful enough to at least wipe out most of the local Flood forms and weaken a Gravemind, reducing it to a Proto-Gravemind as we see in Awakening the Nightmare. I was never a fan of the idea that the ring tearing itself apart was sufficient enough to weaken the pulse to such a degree, but at least with Awakening the Nightmare, I could understand a being as powerful as a Gravemind surviving, albeit weakened. And yeah, we had Hunters in the Dark implying that the pulse didn't wipe out life on the Ark, but there are ways to kinda headcanon around some of the poorer aspects of that story, such as assuming that the ring did work and that Tragic Solitude cloned new life from stored samples collected 100,000 years prior. I mean, the book misunderstands the difference between sentient and sapient, so yeah, I'm not going to take it at its word. But here, it's hard to find sufficient reason these Covenant could have survived. Maybe, given the ship's original purpose in preserving life, these Covenant entered a brief period of stasis or something? Maybe they were told to enter subspace stasis pods or something that provided an extra layer of protection. I don't know. I could see something like that, as dialogue from the Prophet of Truth shows that he seemed to know what the Halo Array actually does by the time of Halo 3. Still, as cool as this confrontation is, it takes a retcon I was never happy about and makes it worse. Every time we hear more about these things surviving the pulse from the end of Halo 3, the more and more it feels like that moment is robbed of any meaning or impact. Moving on, the group soon moves through the Clerestory, the area where samples of living beings collected by Forerunner lifeworkers as part of the conservation measure had once been held. At the end of the Clerestory is a lift which can only carry one group at a time. Minas' group goes first, with Vagadoon and Zeratis' forces to follow. Minas' group arrives at the ship's drive control room, which contains the Aditum, inside of which would be the shards. As Itka goes to work to extract the shards, a group of Covenant Phantoms soon appears, bringing in more enemies. Vagadoon and his Sanghili are already on their way up, but Minas orders Zeratas to stay behind and ensure they have an escape route. And once again, the Banished and Covenant engage with one another, and the battle is costly. Kuros soon appears with an onyx case holding the 3 fragments of the Holy Light, giving it to Minas and asking the chieftain what it was that had convinced him to join the Banished so many years ago. We had previously learned that sometime prior to the downfall of the Covenant, early enough that Minas had no longer been part of the religious hegemony when the Great Schism broke out, he had been tasked with hunting down and killing Atriox. He had eventually found the War Master and had a chance to lay a killing blow, but he hadn't. Instead, he joined the Banished because of something Atriox had told him that day, something he now repeats to Koros.
Everyone must die for something. No one is free from that cost. All must pay it one day. The Covenant, the Banished, even the Forerunners. The question is not if one must give his life. It is, what will you give your life for? And will you believe it? Will it be noble? Would you be willing to die for it if you knew that was the price?
Sick of Covenant hypocrisy, Minas had joined the Banished. Now, Koros, finding what he believed in, would sacrifice his life so that Minas and the others could escape with the crystal shards. Minas tries to convince Koros to come with him, but Koros refuses, sending the chieftain and Vagadoon down the lift they'd come up. Meeting up with Zarathus's forces, they make their escape. And that concludes Sacrifice. Despite the one issue I brought up, as a whole the story is pretty damn interesting. I love that Awakening the Nightmare got a little extra payoff, being part of the reason the raid on the Anodyne Spirit was at all possible, and despite my misgivings about the lore behind it, the reappearance of Old Covenant to haunt the Banished was pretty damn cool. And above all, it was just awesome to see Okro Vagadoon appear here. We know he'll be an assassination target in Halo Infinite, so I loved getting some extra backstory on him, and I can't wait to see how he's fleshed out in Infinite itself. Further, it would be pretty cool if we got to see Minas and Zarathus in Infinite as well. Given his penchant for hunting humans for sport, Zarathus seems like a guarantee, but Minas seems a bit more complex. At the moment, we don't know if he was among those that arrived on Reach with Atriox or not, if he was, or if he made his way back to the Milky Way later in some manner, and moreover, if he appears in Infinite, I hope it's not a straightforward assassination mission. Imagine if he were to turn on the Banished. Maybe his mission to the Anodyne Spirit had disillusioned him, or something in the months that followed. Maybe Eshram's particular style of leadership, or this unknown Harbinger, have caused Minas to question his convictions. Whatever the case ends up being, I hope we get more of him down the line. But that's all for now. What did you think of Sacrifice? Let me know in the comments below. Moreover, let me know about any lingering questions you have about both Sacrifice and Shadows of Reach. I plan to talk about both the stuff retrieved from Castle Base and the full history of the Forerunner Crystal, but let me know what other topics y'all would like me to talk about and shed further light on. Otherwise, until next time, this has been Halo Canon. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this, be sure to check out Audible. By going to audibletrial.com/halocanon, you can get a 30-day free trial and a free audiobook. Audible's selection is unmatched and includes all the Halo novels. You can cancel at any time and keep any audiobooks you've purchased. So check out audibletrial.com/halocanon today.